Since our founding, the United States has always been a maritime nation. From the earliest days, our security and prosperity have depended on free use of the seas. And at least since the end of the Second World War, the United States has had global responsibilities to underwrite the safety and security of the maritime commons. American sea power has ensured that the oceans remain peaceful and open to all. And that maritime order is not a nice to have, it's not an abstraction. More than 80% of global trade moves by sea. Fiber optic cables laid on the seabed carry vast amounts of international data traffic and trillions of dollars in financial transactions daily. And today that order is being tested. The People's Republic of China is working to reshape the Indo-Pacific in ways that advantage the PRC and oftentimes at the expense of others, including our allies and partners. It's systematically adopted and pursued an increasingly expansive and belligerent view of its maritime interests. And inside the first island chain, we've seen China develop artificial features and militarize them. We've seen them seek to operationalize their expansive claims, and they've sought to restrict the lawful activities of other states. This competition is not confined to the surface of the ocean. Rather, China is investing heavily in capabilities designed to operate in and potentially control the undersea domain, an environment that has long provided the United States with a decisive strategic advantage. China is advancing a growing fleet of increasingly capable submarines, unmanned underwater vehicles, seabed sensors, and sophisticated oceanographic mapping programs. Many of these systems have clear dual-use applications, blurring the line between civilian research and military preparations. The United States remains and retains, significant advantages in the undersea domain, but its advantages erode if they are not maintained. As strategic competition with the People's Republic of China intensifies, we must ensure this domain remains a source of strength and deterrence, not vulnerability. I look forward to the testimony of our witnesses and to a substantive discussion on how we safeguard America's interest in this increasingly contested domain. I will now turn the floor over to my colleague and co-chair for this hearing, Vice Chair Michael Kuiken.
There's a book by Russell Shorto called The Island at the Center of the World. It tells the story of how 4 centuries ago, Dutch settlers arrived at a wilderness island called Manhattan and built New Amsterdam, a free trading colony that would become New York City and eventually one of the most powerful places on earth. Manhattan was the island at the center of the world. Today, there's a different island at the center of the world, and it is Taiwan. Consider what is powering this hearing. The lights shining in our faces, the microphones in front of us, the cameras recording this testimony, all of them run on foundational semiconductors that almost certainly come from Taiwan. The iPhone in your pocket, the infrastructure behind whatever conversation you had with Claude or ChatGPT this morning, those run on advanced semiconductors that almost certainly come from Taiwan too. Foundational or advanced, these chips are the lifeblood of virtually everything around us. President Xi has directed the People's Liberation Army to be capable of taking Taiwan by 2027. Look at the calendar, that's 9 months away. We do not know whether capability will become intent, but we do know where the first signals will appear. Space, cyber, and the undersea domain are almost certainly the first places we will see indications and warnings as to whether Beijing intends to move. So today's hearing is in an important sense about Taiwan and about the undersea domain that surrounds it, connects it to the world, and defends it from adversaries. But this hearing is about more than military competition beneath the waves. The undersea domain matters in 3 critical ways, and our panels today will address each of them. First, it is a military domain. For more than 80 years, the United States has held an enduring advantage here. Our stealthy, nuclear-powered submarines provide a key pillar to deterrence. China understands this and is investing deliberately to narrow the gap. At a strategic level, Beijing has elevated the deep sea domain to stand alongside space and cyberspace as a national security priority. This is not rhetorical positioning. It is reflected in concrete capability deployment. President Xi has directed the PLA submarine force to become an elite service, signaling Beijing's intent to strengthen its sea-based deterrent And over the last 5 years, China has accelerated production of nuclear-powered submarines, launching 10 in the last 5 years compared to just 3 in the 5 years before that. China's efforts extend beyond traditional submarines. Drawing lessons from the war in Ukraine, Beijing is exploring how unmanned underwater systems could offset the U.S. advantages, particularly inside the first island chain. Last September, the PLA unveiled 2 new extra-large uncrewed underwater vehicles, adding to its asymmetric capabilities. Chinese researchers are also copying DARPA's UUV designs to develop a long-range armed reconnaissance capability. Second, it is an economic and communications domain, and this is part that most Americans never think about. Right now, roughly 600 fiber optic cables, each the width of a garden hose, sit on the ocean floor. They carry 99% of intercontinental data. More than $10 trillion in financial transactions cross the cables every single day. That data is the feedstock of the global economy. It is what enables payments for household goods, financial transactions between New York and Tokyo, and the vast flows of information that power everything from artificial intelligence to international commerce. Anything that severs or compromises these cables is not merely a communications disruption, it is a direct threat to the circulatory system of the global economy. And China has both the means and the opportunity. Beijing has developed cable cutting tools capable of operating at extreme depths and maintains a fleet of vessels operating near critical undersea infrastructure in the South China Sea and Taiwan Strait. Undersea cables have connected continents for nearly 170 years, since the first transatlantic telegraph cable in 1858. The technology has evolved, but the vulnerability has also grown as our dependence on what flows through them has become near total. Third, it is a strategic resources domain. China is racing to dominate seabed mining, securing more exploration contracts than any other country, and striking deals across the Pacific to tap offshore critical minerals. The resources beneath the ocean floor are vast and largely untapped. Seabed mining as an arena of competition is both old and new, but economic opportunity below the ocean floor will undoubtedly become a focal point of economic statecraft in the coming years and decades. Together, these 3 dimensions, military, economic, and strategic resources, represent a coordinated effort by China to challenge what has long been a decisive American advantage. Beijing is working simultaneously to close the military gap, compromise the communications infrastructure, and dominate the resources. Maintaining the American advantage across all 3 will require sustained attention, investment, and strategic clarity. To help us understand these challenges, we've assembled 3 panels of witnesses today. Our first will offer perspectives on the growing threat to U.S. undersea military superiority. Our second panel will examine China's strategy and growing undersea capabilities. And our third panel will address undersea infrastructure and strategic resources. And with that, I will turn it over to the first panel, and Randy is giving me the things that I need to say before that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today, we welcome Vice Admiral Richard Seif, Commander of U.S. Naval Submarine Forces, and Rear Admiral Mike Brooks, Commander of the Office of Naval Intelligence. As I just said, they will offer their perspectives on the growing threat of U.S. undersea superiority and explain how the department is preparing for China's efforts to challenge U.S. presence.
For decades, United States undersea forces have been a quiet, often unseen foundation of deterrence and wartime leverage, a force able to operate where other forces cannot, to persist where others cannot remain, to create doubt through stealth, speed, agility, and firepower, and to deliver decisive effects without warning. On any given day, our Navy has nuclear ballistic missile submarines, guided missile submarines, and fast attack submarines at sea around the world, today over 20 submarines, all unlocated, all deterring aggression and creating uncertainty for any adversary. Most importantly, those submarines are manned by highly trained, battle-ready sailors, and I would submit, and I am certain that those men and women, those sailors, are always ready, and they are a true advantage. The undersea edge provides stability and has helped preserve a free and open regional order in the Indo-Pacific by complicating any adversary's plans for coercion or aggression. Going forward, that advantage will be tested. China is investing heavily in capabilities intended to reduce U.S. freedom of action in the Western Pacific. through a larger and more modern and capable submarine force, stronger anti-submarine warfare capability and capacity, and expanded sensing and targeting networks in key maritime approaches. The undersea domain delivers 4 strategic benefits for the United States. Deterrence. Undersea forces are the most survivable leg of the nation's nuclear arsenal. This is the capability that most contributes to deterring strategic attack. Similarly, conventionally armed submarines provide credible undersea combat power and lethality, raising uncertainty for an aggressor, making conflict less attractive and escalation riskier. Stealth and survivability. Across the spectrum of competition and conflict, submarines can gather intelligence, monitor adversary activity, and hold targets at risk while remaining difficult to detect, target, or defeat. Our speed and agility provide strategic benefit as a force multiplier, as adversaries know that we could literally be anywhere, anytime. As our World War II commander, Admiral Charles Lockwood, famously said, to put a finer point on it, it is always the factor of the unknown that instills fear in the enemy and leads the way to victory. Power projection. Submarines provide prompt, precision strike options with little warning and impose costs without requiring large, visible force packages. Sea denial and sea control. Undersea forces can threaten an adversary's surface ships, logistics, and maritime commerce, often at times and places of our choosing. And our endurance allows us to create that factor of unknown to carry out these missions for months at a time and anywhere in the world. China's strategic aim is increasingly clear: to make U.S. intervention in regional conflict slower, costlier, and riskier, and to expand China's control of contested waters, particularly within and beyond the first island chain. To support that objective, China is pursuing a multi-pronged undersea strategy. First, submarine modernization. China is fielding newer nuclear and conventional submarines, likely with improved sensors and weapons, and, by many public accounts, steadily improving quieting and operational proficiency. Anti-submarine warfare improvement. China is expanding its fleet of ASW aircraft, surface combatants, helicopters, and undersea sensing intended to detect, localize, and track submarines operating near China's maritime approaches. Seabed and network sensing in key areas. Public reporting and Chinese industrial statements have described efforts to deploy seabed sensors and connected networks in part of the South and East China Sea, often referred to in commentary as an underwater Great Wall. The strategic implication is not perfect undersea transparency, but rather could be a narrowing of the stealth margin in specific choke points and operating areas. In the area of unmanned and autonomous systems, China is also investing in unmanned underwater vehicles for reconnaissance, mapping, and potentially mine warfare and counter-mine warfare, capabilities that could scale and persist at lower cost than manned platforms. The core requirement for the United States is straightforward and it is enduring. Today, we must continue to deliver a battle-ready force. We must leverage our undersea advantage and deter aggression by maintaining ready, responsive, and credible undersea forces and capabilities. We must continue to deliver battle-ready sailors by giving them the tools, training, and resources they need to be successful. We must deliver the battle force of both today and tomorrow. We must grow capacity, and we must develop and integrate new platforms, technology, and capabilities to maintain our advantage and preserve undersea freedom of action in the future. As Submarine Force Commander, I am laser-focused on the following lines of effort. First, posture the fleet to deter and win by sustaining and growing submarine capacity and readiness. This includes accelerating both new submarine production and in-service submarine maintenance throughput, strengthening the industrial base, protecting operational availability, and investing in basing and infrastructure. Second, we must maintain an operational posture that preserves initiative, operating forward, complicating China's planning, and demonstrating the ability to hold key targets at risk while managing escalation and protecting sources and methods. We must continue investment in our asymmetric capabilities, expand distributed undersea sensing and countersensing, invest in resilient networks, fixed, mobile, and unmanned, that improve command and control, cueing and targeting while complicating an adversary's ability to localize U.S. undersea forces. We must field robotic and autonomous systems at scale, build and employ a family of unmanned systems for ISR, payload delivery, and mine and countermine missions, paired with robust command and control and autonomy that works in these contested environments. And we must leverage our allies and partners, deepen allied and partner nation interoperability and interchangeability in the undersea domain. Increase data sharing, combined training, interoperable systems, and coordinated posture with allies and partners, especially those positioned along critical maritime approaches. In closing, the undersea domain remains a decisive U.S. advantage, but our margin is being tested and it cannot be taken for granted. If we invest with urgency, build capacity, and integrate with our allies and partners, the United States can maintain credible deterrence and ensure the Indo-Pacific remains free and open.
Thank you for inviting me to testify here today to discuss the national security implications of the People's Liberation Army Navy, or PLAN, and their efforts to dominate the undersea domain. China views undersea warfare as an element of its naval strategy, essential to both defending its coast and projecting power across the Indo-Pacific. This capability is essential to Beijing's approach for countering the United States in the maritime domain. However, China perceives its undersea capabilities as vulnerable to the United States. This concern is driving investment in quieter submarines, enhanced operational security, seabed sensor networks, and unmanned vehicles. Further, the plan has embarked on an effort to build network capabilities in space, above the sea, on the sea, and under the sea, with all working in concert to create a comprehensive system designed to control key maritime areas and force an adversary to withdraw before they can threaten Chinese interests. China currently operates one of the world's largest submarine fleets with 60 submarines. There are 6 nuclear-powered attack submarines that form the offensive backbone, a growing number of nuclear-powered guided missile variants for precision strikes, 6 ballistic missile submarines ensuring nuclear deterrence, and more than 50 diesel-electric submarines, many with air-independent propulsion extending their underwater endurance. More striking than fleet size is China's domestic submarine production capacity. Through massive infrastructure investments at several of its primary shipyards, China has more than doubled its submarine construction capability, setting up for sustained submarine growth through the 2030s and beyond. Furthermore, the submarine fleet is undergoing a fundamental transformation. China is shifting from diesel-electric to all nuclear-powered submarine construction, a strategic departure from historical patterns. This includes developing smaller nuclear submarines, roughly the size of conventional submarines, potentially filling regional patrol missions more economically than full-size nuclear attack submarines. China's newest operational attack submarines also represent a progression forward in capability. With the ability to launch anti-ship and land attack cruise missiles, these platforms enhance China's long-range strike capability. China's ballistic missile submarines, equipped with long-range strategic nuclear missiles, can now target portions of the United States from protected waters near China. Additionally, next-generation platforms, expected by the late 2030s, will incorporate substantial advances in design and weapons. By 2027, Chinese submarine force will likely include 70 submarines, and by 2035, continued expansion could yield approximately 80 submarines, with approximately half of those nuclear-powered. Projections for the early 2040s include 20 modern attack submarines designed for operations well beyond the second island chain, and 10 ballistic nuclear submarines that can threaten our homeland from bastions inside China's near seas. Additionally, China has invested in unmanned underwater vehicles for over 2 decades, fusing military and civilian technologies. Underwater gliders collect oceanographic data, improving sonar performance. And China has revealed extra-large unmanned vehicle concepts capable of reconnaissance, mine placement, and one-way attacks. Beijing envisions autonomous vehicles for long-range mine and ISR missions, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, with unmanned systems operating independently or in swarms alongside manned platforms, emphasizing modular payloads, sensors, mines, torpedoes, missiles, and even deployable smaller vehicles. Central to China's strategy is what they call the Underwater Great Wall, a seabed sensor architecture monitoring submarine activity through fixed and floating platforms. These systems gather hydrographic and intelligence data to enhance China's understanding of the undersea domain. China has also made deep-sea mineral mining a national strategic priority. Chairman Xi Jinping has championed this effort, driving major investment in mining technology, targeting minerals essential for advanced batteries, electronics, and defense applications, areas where China already dominates terrestrial supply chains. In fact, China holds more exploration contracts from the International Seabed Authority than any other nation, 5 of the 22 mining permits. We are concerned that China's deep-sea mining operations could serve dual-use purposes. The data they're collecting from mapping the ocean floor directly supports submarine warfare capabilities. That is, they're learning the seafloor's topography, which helps with submarine navigation and concealment. They're gathering information about acoustic characteristics, which allows them to optimize their sonar systems. And they're identifying locations for anchoring systems, places where they could potentially deploy sensors or weapons platforms in the future. By 2040, China's undersea forces may credibly challenge U.S. undersea dominance, complicating crisis response and allied defense. China's deep-sea capabilities could threaten undersea cables and sensor networks critical for communications and military operations. Its push for deep-sea minerals could extend control of critical supply chains from land to sea. In closing, China is pursuing a unified approach linking strategy, naval modernization, seabed infrastructure, and resource extraction. We cannot assume U.S. undersea advantages will endure without sustained investment, innovation, and strategic focus.
Admiral Seif, a couple questions for you. One, I really appreciate the recommendations you offered, very substantial, 6 recommendations. Some of these would involve more money, expenditures. So if you had to prioritize in a resource-constrained environment, where would you put investment? Or maybe these are in rank order. I don't think I heard you say that, but is there anything you want to sort of emphasize as something you think is particularly important and would be a resource priority?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for the question. This is really just gets to the heart of why this is such an important topic and with the meeting here today. The first thing I want to do is talk about the value we place in recent support, such as the National Sea-Based Deterrence Fund and the recent FY26 NDA expansion of continuous production for critical components for both Columbia and Virginia-class submarines. Those efforts are absolutely foundational to our success. And they allow the Navy and our industrial partners to award timely contracts promoting the stability and predictability of essential for growth in our submarine construction capacity. I think the need to sustain and grow submarine capacity and readiness. We talk about combat surge-ready submarines. There's really 2 ways to get at that. One is through improving the construction rate and the production of new submarines, but just as important, I'd say more importantly, is getting existing submarines through maintenance and back out at sea, back in a combat surge-ready status. So those 2 go hand in hand. Again, both new construction and in-service submarines. And to do that, we need to strengthen the industrial base, but it's also basing in infrastructure. And as far as investing in asymmetric capabilities, Mr. Chairman, I would say if I had $1 to spend, I would spend it on wide area search and sensing. And that can be fixed systems, that can be deployable systems, that can be manned and unmanned or hybrid systems. There are efforts to recapitalize existing capability, but if you look just from an Indo-Pacific perspective, if you look at the vastness of the theater and the expanding capabilities, or really capacity numbers of adversary submarines, the need for wide area search, that we can use for domain awareness is absolutely critical. I'd also go back to fielding robotic and autonomous systems at scale. We are working on a family of systems, everything from what we call extra large unmanned undersea vehicles, think like big payload trucks for things like mine warfare or other payloads, as well as large diameter torpedo tube launch and recovery, just a whole family of systems. So the more we can invest and move out at scale, it will be critically important in the future. And I would also, and finally, I did not mention in my opening remarks, but the investment and the focus on SSNX, which is our next generation nuclear attack submarine, will be critically important. The Virginia-class submarine is highly capable. It is by far the most capable nuclear attack submarine that's ever existed in the world, but that initial design is actually 30 years old. And as we continue to develop Block 5, Block 6, Block 7, and Block 8 Virginias, at some point we'll need a different form factor with just fundamental differences, and so I'd ask for the support of the SSNX program, sir. Thank you for the question.
We were studying Soviet, Russian systems, and my recollection is the PLAN was a bit of an afterthought at the time, and things have changed very dramatically. And it's a very dynamic environment, as you noted, all the investments that the PRC is making. Where would you see are the critical gaps in terms of our understanding of RED here, and what might be required to close those gaps? Is it resources? Is it reapportioning resources from the global challenges we're trying to address? Is there something that is really glaring to you that we need to know more about, that there's a capability gap on our part to be able to understand it better?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. I concur with Vice Admiral Sea's comments with regard to the sort of asymmetric advantage that the U.S. submarine force represents, both the platforms and the sailors, ready and resilient, and then the foundry that supports them. Part of that foundry is the Naval Intelligence Enterprise. And so when Vice Admiral Seif talks about investing in wide areas, surveillance, and collection capabilities against an adversary, fully support, strongly support, but I urge folks not to forget about the processing, exploitation, and dissemination with regard to what we collect. And so we spent a lot of time tracking the Chinese development in all these areas, whether it's quieter submarines or the system of systems that they're using to try to make the ocean appear transparent. Ultimately, we need to invest in the folks that are actually going to exploit that, subject matter experts, but also tools to be able to do it more efficiently and effective. So artificial intelligence algorithms, for example. Thank you for the questions.
You know, what we see the Chinese do on a routine basis is they deploy sort of civilian vessels, research vessels, military vessels, and in theory, and sort of the way we've thought about this historically, is they operate in sort of separate and parallel lines of effort. But what we're starting to see, or what we really have seen China do over the last decade or so, is that these are actually truly integrated efforts. This is sort of one force, one fight. And so as we think about recommendations to Congress on countering this activity in the undersea domain especially, how should we think about that?
Okay, yeah, thanks for the question. I do, first of all, firmly agree with your point where there's a blending of maritime militia, Coast Guard activity, even things like civilian trawlers potentially being integrated for broader activity. I think from an undersea perspective, we are aware of that. We track that activity closely. And as far as like a risk imposed, I do think that we, as a stealth force, we put tremendous value on our ability to avoid detection and to be, as we say in our community, always on scene but rarely seen. And so I do think that there could be a complication there where you're not quite sure the ambiguity of sort of different actors and activity. As far as concerns or how to manage, right now I would say that's a manageable concern. To Admiral Brooks's point about this underwater Great Wall, I think that's just another area where we have to continue to learn more about what the goals are and what the potential risks are. So thanks for the question.
Mr. Vice Chairman, fully concur with the military-civilian fusion. Chinese have oceanographic research fleet of approximately 60 vessels. At least 80 or so have been identified as having direct ties to the PLAN. PLAN regularly exploits the information that they derive and has dual use and certainly military capabilities. And so I think it's, awareness is the first step, awareness that that's a problem. And then looking at specific technologies that, potentially would support oceanographic research in a civilian capacity, but understanding the potential dual-use military relationship there and restricting those. Additionally, restricting access for ostensibly civilian researchers whose results of their research will fuel the PLAN. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. There's a lot of coverage these days about lessons learned from Ukraine, particularly with respect to drones. How should we think about lessons learned from Ukraine and the Black Sea and apply that to sort of potential lessons for the Taiwan conflict and beyond? Again, to both of you, Vice Admiral Seif, if you want to go first, go ahead.
So, sir, we view, we spend a lot of time thinking about what the future looks like. And if we talked about uncrewed vehicles, airborne or undersea or on the surface, I would say that future is here. And what we expect the future to look like is actually more of the same, sort of greater scope and scale with regard to what we're being asked to do in the uncrewed world. But I think what we see next is pairing that with artificial intelligence and quantum computing technology to make it more effective and more efficient and to make them more ubiquitous. I think that's what the future looks like.
Thank you. Admiral Seif, in your testimony, you talked about forward operational presence being one of your 6 recommendations. Can you just zoom out, or not zoom out, I guess zoom in, because we want to talk about the undersea domain here, how we should think about that in the undersea context?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think just fundamentally, we place tremendous value on the interchangeability and integration of our most capable allies and partners, whether that's Australia, Japan, South Korea, and on our treaty allies, as well as our broader partners. I think as we work to be, when we use the term interchangeable versus interoperable, just to put a finer point on that, interoperable might mean that we can communicate together, we can share tactics, we can work together under a combined maritime component commander. Interchangeable means that if a U.S. aircraft is supposed to fly and cover a mission, but they can't for some reason, that an allied aircraft can just plug and play right in there. That could be a submarine, that could be a surface ship. So that's really the goal, and that's the end state. I also think that the value, if you just differentiate what the United States and our allies bring compared to China, and you look at the value and contribution of our allies and partners who are committed, capable, and interchangeable, I really do think that's a tremendous advantage that the United States has over China, where they really have no answer for our ability to fully integrate with our most capable allies. Thank you.
There's obviously a lot of interplay between China's commercial activity and its military activity. Is there anything in this domain that is purely commercial? Or how are you looking at this, and how does this play into the military ambitions wholly? Is there anything that can be overlooked or ignored as just purely a commercial endeavor? Or is this completely overlapping?
Thank you for the question. Commissioner, I think China understands the value proposition of the U.S. submarine force and its asymmetric advantage in the undersea realm. China understands it is behind and is looking for every advantage to erode that lead that we have. So I think a short answer to your question would be no. There is nothing in the undersea realm that is simply solely commercial, certainly not from the Chinese perspective. When we talk about, we mentioned the oceanographic research vessels, ostensibly civilian research missions potentially, but they can be, China has identified the seabed as the next area for military competition. And so those oceanographic research vessels are looking for ways to protect their own infrastructure undersea, but also looking for ways to attack others, adversaries' infrastructure. Similarly, with regard to deep-sea mining for minerals, applications for obviously commercial use, but military as well. And so I do think from my perspective, there's not a single area there from the Chinese perspective that is limited to solely commercial capability.
Hey, Commissioner, if I could just add to that too. First off, I alerted on your term ignore. There is nothing we're ignoring about any Chinese activity, whether it's ostensibly civilian or military or this kind of gray, sort of blended area. Another example would be in the Arctic. China has declared themselves a near Arctic nation, and what that means and that level of activity. I highlight that just because this is a global issue, and I know we're here to talk about Indo-PACOM. I would say that we are laser focused on all Chinese activity in the Indo-Pacific, but we're also looking more broadly at this accumulation of Chinese activity, whether it's commercial or military worldwide. Thank you.
And then one more question for you, Admiral Seif. We've talked a lot about innovation in this space, but we've also talked about America's dominance historically. That would suggest that we have platforms and technology that are dated. What percentage of our platforms that we rely on and technology that we rely on is dated and being maintained? How are we maintaining it? And what is the deterioration in the immediate future?
So this is a really good question, and I think the way I'll approach it is just looking at our overall force structure. So today we have 48 attack submarines. That's about an even mix of Newer Virginia-class submarines, as well as Seawolf-class submarines and Los Angeles-class submarines. Although a very fair point that some of those submarines are, as we say, American classics. They are over 30 years old, in some cases even older. What we do have, though, is a very robust refresh, technical insertion is what we call it, to take the latest technology and very, very quickly and rapidly, not quite like a Tesla, but very quickly and rapidly upgrade the technology and upgrade the capabilities as we bring on new, like Admiral Brooks mentioned, quantum computing. We start to look at artificial intelligence, machine learning. I can tell you today we have over a dozen submarines that have really state-of-the-art algorithms. We call it like a co-pilot for AI/ML. Anywhere you have a lot of data and not a lot of analysts to look at the data, it screams for AI/ML as an example. So I guess what I would just say is that the credible deterrence that comes with our undersea forces is underpinned by this ability to quickly update. And so going forward, whether it's quantum, whether it's artificial intelligence, machine learning, or other new capability, or even unmanned systems, as we integrate those payloads, we'll be fully ready to do that. Thank you.
As we're examining these undersea threats in the Indo-Pacific, beyond submarine capabilities, can you speak about the importance of maintaining forward deployment access? You spoke earlier about China increasing its capabilities. And as we see that sort of across the board, how important are strategic sites such as Diego Garcia and the Chagos Islands?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I'll take this one first, Alan Brooks. Again, our mission is to dominate the undersea and to deter aggression through our readiness for decisive victory in combat, and that really is our core business. When we start to look at the forward basing, or we call forward deployed naval forces, the obvious value is being already in position, already ready to do not just the sustainment, but the sustained operations and operating tempo that's required. For example, we have 5 nuclear attack submarines home ported in Guam. We have a very robust forward deployed naval force capability in Yokosuka. Does not include submarines, but includes support of submarines. And then looking forward to the AUKUS, what's called Phase 1 of Pillar 1, we will by the end of 2027, we will have the first U.S. flagged submarine operating out of Western Australia, out of Garden Island there. So, what I would say is that forward presence creates doubt for adversaries, where we can very, very quickly be on scene. We can very, very quickly sustain. Again, we are literally only limited by the amount of food that our submarines can carry. So think about 100, 120. 140 days of operations with freeze-dried food to even back that up, because as a force commander, I can't have a boat be on day 90 of an underway and then have to surge them for combat operations. We have to have a backup plan. So bottom line is the forward deployed presence means we're always there, and our ability to sustain operations it really adds value. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you. The vulnerability of undersea cables is increasingly important. The internet literally runs on undersea cables. While I agree with you completely, detection is important. I guess there's a little bit of ambiguity sort of over how do you protect, how do you repair, getting to sort of the Commissioner's earlier question. Can you walk us through a little bit what the military's current role is given the limitations in the CCP shadow activity? Either of you.
So for undersea cables, one of the value propositions for the Office of Naval Intelligence is to provide indications and warning on adversary threats to key undersea infrastructure, and that's something we do. Additionally, with regard to commercial cable cuts, we're often asked to provide, ascribe attribution to how that potentially occurred. I will tell you, from my sense, cables are valuable and they're vulnerable, but networks themselves potentially can be resilient. So we talked a little bit about the valuable piece. 99% of all traffic goes undersea, $12 trillion in commerce on a daily basis, so definitely valuable. They are vulnerable. Most folks don't understand that cables are cut about 200 times a year, so approximately every 36 hours. Most folks don't understand that that happens, though, because service providers are paid to provide that service, and so they built redundancy into their networks, providing resiliency. And so any part of any plan to protect cables need to include investing in a degree of redundancy and then the capability to quickly repair as well as lay new cables.
Perfect, thank you. Last question, Admiral Brooks, you spoke about sort of the incorporation of tech and threats. Can you speak briefly about how you see the PLA leveraging and implementing AI into some of these upcoming sort of activities they have, the capabilities they have, and is the United States keeping pace with the implementation?
So the People's Liberation Army Navy is interested in doing much of the same things we are. They are looking for, as we are looking for opportunities to stay ahead, they are looking for opportunities to catch up. And so hence the whole-scale investment in a family of undersea, unmanned undersea systems. And I think they view artificial intelligence and quantum computing much the same way as we do, as a shortcut to keeping up or catching up.
Okay, thank you.
Admiral Seif, your testimony talks about how undersea competition is often localized. Where would you say the Chinese localization advantage begins to ebb? Is it somewhere off China's coast? Is it first island chain? Is it second island chain? How should we think about this?
Yeah, Commissioner, thank you for that question. So again, our core mission is to dominate the undersea and to deter that the aggression through our presence and our readiness. I think intuitively, if you look at, we would say, fighting a home game for the Chinese, or their ability to mass capability and to have a very sustained presence in areas inside the first island chain, we have to acknowledge that. At the same time, sir, I would tell you that we will not cede any operating areas, any battle space to any potential adversary. But this, as we go ahead, the way I would say it is that the Chinese are on an all-domain access denial plan. They are looking to deny us access in cyber and space, and then in the undersea. And I think that's really why we're here today, is because the area where we know we have a solid advantage is in the undersea. At the same time, I would say just fundamentally, the farther away from coastlines, coastal defense, the chairman mentioned buildup of islands, that sort of thing. The farther you get away from that umbrella of kind of near tactical activity is where I'd say that any advantage the Chinese might have today would certainly ebb. And I'll turn it over to Admiral Brooks to talk next. Thanks.
Sir, if I could add to that, where the Chinese are now is not where they want to be. The Chinese are building a global fleet, ability project power globally. And so when we see the development of new advanced nuclear submarines with advanced quieting and weapon systems conducting extended out-of-area deployments, that's the shape of things to come. And so I concur with Vice Admiral Seif with regard to the closer they are inside the first island chain, potentially out to the second island chain, they're more capable, but they're not satisfied with that. And so they're continuing to pursue a global fleet. And along with that global fleet would be infrastructure, so bases or port facilities which they can pull in to support that global fleet. So I wouldn't spend too much time focused on where they are. I would look to where they're going to be. Thank you, sir.
Sure. Another question for either or both of you. What is the UUV threat to our submarines? Typically when we hear about UUVs, we think of them in terms of affecting landing barges in the Taiwan Strait or sensing underwater in sort of narrow channels or creating a wall so that one force can't get to where they want to be. But what's the future point? Or how far are we away from these UUVs, either because of advances in technology or they're just flat out proliferation, where they become a true threat to our advanced submarines?
So I'll start with the answer to that question. And so again, we talk about asymmetric advantage the U.S. submarine force presents. Chinese seeking to erode that advantage. They're building what we refer to as a system of systems. We've both mentioned the underwater Great Wall. The concept of UUVs are multifaceted. So I'm an intel officer, I'm mostly interested in what they're going to, collection. So these UUVs are a part of the system of systems of collection to turn the ocean transparent so that they can detect U.S. submarines. But also UUVs have operational missions or roles, whether it's delivering mines or torpedoes or a one-way attack. And so in addition to making the ocean transparent, they want to be able to detect, track, and if necessary, engage adversary platforms. Thank you for the question, sir.
Okay, so I'll, first of all, concur with everything Admiral Brooks just hit on. What I would say near term, any threat or any concern we would have about unmanned vehicles would be in the sensing domain, where wave gliders, things that might be able to, fielding things at scale, deployable systems might present a concern about fleeting detections of U.S. forces. Going forward, I think it's about payloads, things like mine warfare, ability to covertly deliver effects, and we talked about some of the seabed activity. Near term, though, I don't want to downplay, but I think that the concern now is manageable. But as Admiral Brooks said, I think it's a growth area, something we'll have to continue to stay ahead of. Thank you.
In your written testimony, you talk a bit about China's bilateral relationships, specifically related to seabed mining. Can you talk a little bit more about that and what those relationships are and what you're watching most carefully?
Commissioner, are you referring to the military-civilian fusion in their approach to seabed?
Yeah, it's in the section under deep-sea mining dual-use concerns, yes.
Yes, ma'am. So as I noted, China is pursuing military-civilian fusion both with technologies in the UUV family of unmanned underwater systems, but also with regard to taking advantage of any type of oceanographic research that is conducted in the undersea domain. So that includes understanding sensing in the water column, whether it's currents or temperatures or salinity, to improve sensors, and then understanding seabed topography to be able to drive military applications from that, being able to identify critical undersea infrastructure associated with adversaries that they would subsequently potentially be able to attack. So that partnership between the military and the civilian is ingrained into essentially everything that they do.
You particularly talked about the Cook Islands, Kiribati, just in terms of the security of the area. Can you expand on that?
Yes, ma'am. So that gets a little bit to China is interested in doing deep-sea mineral exploration outside its EEZ and is working with other countries, other partners, to help them to be able to exploit mining in their EEZ. And essentially, it's an extension of the Belt and Road Initiative that they use where they use economic leverage to then subsequently gain political or military advantage. So ultimately, once they get the country hooked on their economic infrastructure advantages that they provide, they use that as leverage for political gains or to allow military access. And so that's a concern.
Thank you. And Vice Admiral Seif, you talk about need to really rely on our allies, partners. You've mentioned it in response to several questions already. It's something, obviously, we put a lot of time and energy into. Is there areas where we need to expand?
Yes, ma'am. Thanks for the question. Again, just to reiterate, we place tremendous value on the allies and partners and proven partners in maintaining a free and open Indo-Pacific. I think I'll just hit on AUKUS, to me, as a great example of burden sharing and what I think right looks like, where if we look at emerging technology, AUKUS Pillar 1 is nuclear-powered submarine technology, but AUKUS Pillar 2 is really everything else that can add value to our ability to fight together for both Australia and the UK. I think that this to me is a great model of going forward what we need to be focused on. We need to break down barriers about information sharing, about technology exchange. We have to really streamline any hindrance or any sort of slowdowns that we have there, because our allies and partners are very committed. They are very eager to fight with us, but we can't leave them behind. We can't, as Admiral Brooks is talking about, quantum, artificial intelligence, new emerging technology, unmanned systems is another one. We can't let ourselves get too outpaced or out of step with our allies. We have to maintain that ability to be interchangeable. And again, in the Australia example, we're fully integrated. We use the same heavyweight torpedo. We use the same fire control system. We use the same unmanned systems. We have about 200 Australians, submariners, either on our submarines today or in our training pipeline. We have another 200 Australian workers embedded at Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard. So again, we are fully integrated with this goal of being interchangeable. I would just offer that to me as I think as a good model going forward. Thank you for the question.